In the last section, we just set up a spring and it bounces our character, but what if we want to show that sprung version of it so that we can show that the player actually kind of bounced it up and add a little bit more fun and feel to it? Well, we're going to need to do something a little bit different. And in fact, it's time for us to start writing a second script. So far, we've written all of our game code on the player, and that's fine when we're starting out and when the game is small. But as things grow, we're going to want to write code for multiple different types of objects. In fact, we're probably going to want to write multiple scripts just for our player as well. So we're going to need to create a new script for our spring that can do some visual swapping, that can maybe change the way the sprite looks when the player bounces. It's relatively simple to do, but we've got to get past that concept of multiple scripts. So we're going to need to add a new script to our spring. We're going to go into our scripts folder first and create it. So we'll go to assets, go up to scripts. I'm going to right click and choose create and choose a new C# script, or just C# script right here. We'll name this spring with a capital S, S-P-R-I-N-G, and hit enter. This should generate my file, and I'll open it up in my code editor. Just hitting enter should open up the code editor and find it. If it doesn't, what I recommend is usually go back to Unity and then do it again. Most of the time, the second time through, it will find the actual file. All right, so we've got our file right here, our spring class, and if yours doesn't match, just remember that the class name right here has to match the file name here. Make sure that they match. If you messed it up, changed it, just make sure that they match afterwards, including the casing. Get that exactly right. So in our spring, we want to be able to change out the sprite on our sprite renderer. So what we're going to do is get a reference to our sprite renderer, check when we're colliding with a player, and when we are, we'll swap the sprite, and then when we're no longer colliding with a player, we'll swap the sprite back. So first we're going to get rid of our start and update methods because we're not going to use either one of these in this class at all, and there's really no benefit to having them here. The key benefit is that they're here automatically when we create a new script, so we have like a good starting point. We know where to put things if we're new to Unity or we're just kind of getting started, not sure what to do. But if we know what we're going to do, and here I do know what we're going to do, we can take all of that code right there and just hit delete and have a nice empty public class with no extra stuff in it. So what are we going to put in here? Well, we're going to start with some collision methods. In Unity, we can get callbacks or method calls whenever an object collides with another object. In this case, we want to check when anything collides with our spring, and we're going to want to know if it's the player, and if it's the player, we're going to want to do some fancy, flashy graphics things. Well, there's semi-flashy and fancy. Let's take a look at what that looks like. We're going to start with the onCollisionEnter2D method. So I'll begin by typing on collision enter and just let it auto complete. I didn't worry about the casing because I know it auto complete's going to find it. I'm going to choose on collision enter 2D and hit enter. I'll get this nice method, private void on collision enter 2D, with a collision 2D parameter named collision. First, I'm going to delete the private keyword just because I don't need it. And then I'm going to go down into our method on line 9. And what we want to do is check the collider of this collision 2D object. This thing is just some data that tells us what the collision was and gives us more information about the collision, like what hit it, what object it hit, what angle it hit at, and what point in the world, and so on. But all we really care about is what hit it. So we're going to say if collision dot collider dot compare tag, and then we want to put in the word player. So if the collider has a tag of player, and we're going to talk about that in a moment, then we want to show our sprung version. So we're going to need to modify our sprite renderer and show a sprung sprite. We'll do get component and get the sprite renderer. And then we're going to set the sprite on that sprite renderer. So we'll say the sprite renderers dot sprite is equal to, and here we're going to assign like a sprung sprite. So let's say underscore sprung. Now we're going to need to generate a field for our sprung sprite. So I hit Alt Enter and generate a field. And then we're going to make this a serialized field so that it shows up in the inspector. Because if I do it just like this, sprung will be null or nothing or not assigned. And this is just going to empty out our sprite. That's not what we want. We want a serialized field so that we can then assign a sprite to it. Let's save, get rid of the star, go into Unity and test this out and see what we've got so far, how it works, and then make a couple modifications. So we've got our spring class here. We're going to need to attach it to the spring object. Let's go select the spring. I'll minimize my box collider and drag the spring script over here, and that will attach it here. If you have a hard time with that, remember you can hit add component and just start typing the word spring and you'll find it as well. Just make sure you only have one, you don't want two. Now on our spring, we have a spot for the sprite. And I told you I wanted the sprung sprite, so I'm going to hit the little search box and search for the word sprung, S-P-R-U-N-G, and then go select it. I can also remember use control and the mouse wheel to zoom in and see the graphics of these. But I'm going to choose sprung. I will save and then play with control P because I don't want to click the mouse right now. And then we'll go over there and touch that thing and see if the graphic changes. You should expect to see, though, that the spring graphic on that sprite renderer right here is going to change to sprung and the visual will look different. Well, not yet. So why didn't it look different? What happened? Why isn't it changing? Well, let's take a look at our code one more time. We're comparing and checking for this player tag, and we haven't talked about tags yet. So where are tags? Why is that tag not assigned, and what does it mean? Let's go look at our player. Notice this untagged keyword up here. This is the default tag that's on every game object when you create. When you create an object, it has no tags assigned. Just like it has the default layer, it comes with untagged. I'm going to go back to the player now, click the drop down, and choose the player tag. That tag exists by default. It's one of the most common things people need to use, so it's just there. You can, however, create your own tags. If you go to add tag and then hit plus, you can start putting in your own special tags like environment or whatever. And then when you go select your character, you'll see that tag show up. Now I'm going to go delete that tag because that's not a tag I actually want. We will go through and do some tagging later. For now, I'm going to clear out my tags, go back to the player, and make sure that he has the player tag assigned. We'll save, press play again. And now only when I collide with the player should I get that visualization change. If I collide with another object or something, I shouldn't expect to see that change on the spring. So let's run over. Look at that. As soon as I hit it, it changed. Now, that's a problem, though, because it's staying permanently like that, and that's not really what I want. I want this to modify a little bit and just like change and then switch back when I leave the collision. So as soon as I'm no longer touching it, I want to kind of like bounce back down. Let's go back to the spring code. And just like we have an on collision enter 2D, you might have guessed there's an on collision exit 2D. So I'll just go down here and type on collision exit. And so I just typed ONCOL and I can find exit 2D right there. I'll hit enter, delete that private keyword again. And then here, let's just take lines 11 and 12, copy them, Control C, and go down to 17 and paste with Control V. Now, I don't actually want to do that. I don't want to set the sprite back to sprung if I leave. I want to set it to the default sprite or the normal sprite. And I got a couple ways that I can do that. I could add another serialized field here and have like the default sprite, but then I'm kind of setting it twice. I'm setting it in here. Let's take a look at what that would look like. If I said default sprite and I saved, I would come over to Unity and then I would have two sprites down here and one up here that I have to assign. I've got to assign the one that's there, and then I've got to assign the one that gets kind of reassigned or reapplied when I exit. So there's the one when we start, the one when we spring, and any second now, yeah, the default. And I don't like that. Instead, I want to take this value and have my spring just know about it and kind of fill in this default instead of having it be serialized. So let's go back to the spring. I'm going to remove the serialized field from my default sprite. And then I'm going to add an awake method. An awake method is where we do a lot of our setup and initialization, just like in the player. And we're going to do that for our spring as well. So I'll type in awake. I'll get rid of my private keyword, control and delete, by the way. Get rid of that whole word if I'm at the beginning of it. And in our awake, we're going to say underscore default sprite equals, and here I want to do something, get it from the sprite renderer. And you might have noticed I've got get component sprite renderer, get component sprite renderer, and I'm just about to write another get component sprite renderer. Let's see, renderer, and get the sprite from there. But that's not what I want to do. I want to just save this sprite renderer off so I don't have to make this call multiple times. So I'm just going to take this get component part, cut it, add a new line, say underscore sprite renderer equals, and I'll paste in my get component call. Hit home, alt enter, and generate a field. And now I've got a cached sprite renderer in my spring class. Delete that private keyword, just double click it and hit delete a couple times. And then let's take that sprite renderer, copy it, Control C, the underscore sprite renderer, paste it right before the sprite. So now we've got the sprite renderer, we've cached the default sprite right here. And then in our other two parts where we call get component, let's just replace those with underscore sprite renderer. So we don't have to make that semi-expensive call more than once. The last thing that we need to do is reuse our default sprite. So on collision exit, instead of going to the sprung sprite, we'll go to the default sprite. We'll just paste that in. So copy it from here and paste with Control C, Control V. And then we'll jump back into Unity and jump around, and let's see our spring bounce up and down. At least that's what we should expect to see. And this default sprite field could completely disappear. All right, it should start playing. And we jump over there, boing, and you can see it bouncing, and now we're getting that effect. All right, so that is exactly what I wanted. I'm going to stop playing, go into Plastic, and commit that we've added a sprung effect. Actually, first let's make sure we've saved. Go to File, Save Project as well. Make sure that our tag manager and everything are in there. Say added spring visualization. And we'll check in our changes.